And here we are, it's after 6 o'clock, the sun's over the yard arm, and we're able to have a glass of wine and just talk with Clive about the life he lived before he came to Lavenham, which is very varied and interesting, and not many people know about it. So when you left university, you had a feeling you might like to go into the diplomatic service. So you thought perhaps you might like to have another language which would help when you went into the exams. So would you like to tell us about what you did to learn something?
Well, it was while I was up at Oxford, actually, and I decided that the better bet would be to learn Russian, because it seemed to be the popular language at that time, and my French wasn't very good. And so I sat down with a lingophone, and I had a 78 records I used to go around, learning on lingophone. They went on and on, round and round. Elizabeth got very fed up with them.
Oh,
She
yes.
heard enough Russian, and I learnt enough just about, I thought I was just about to it, but I went to a family, Russian family, living in Drogheda in Ireland, for 3 weeks to just brush up my conversation, and when I arrived at the door...
Were you quite proud of your Russian at this stage?
I
You
was
felt
quite
you'd
proud
done
of it.
quite well.
I thought I'd done pretty
Yes.
well. I thought it was going to be all right, but I thought it'd do me good to have 3 weeks conversation. And the lady of the family opened the door to me, and I greeted her in my perfect Russian.
Lingophone Russian.
Then she looked at me in horror, and she said, "You speak Russian like a Moscow tram conductor." This was the start. So she had to rub that off in 3 weeks.
But when you came out, did you speak reasonable Russian then?
I suppose I passed. I got through the Foreign Office anyway.
Yeah.
They weren't very exacting in those days. But I never spoke Russian the whole of the rest of my career, as a matter of fact.
But it stood you in good stead because it made the Russians have great respect for you and what they said in front of you, I think.
Well, at one later stage of my life, when I was working with Russians as an ambassador, and I sat in a round table between the American ambassador and the Russian ambassador. We sat in alphabetical order. The Russian ambassador kept putting his file cover up, the left-hand file cover up, and I said, "You know, it's no good point you're doing that. I can't read what it says in your papers. If I could, I wouldn't be able to understand it." And he looked at me and he said, "We know better than that." I thought, very strange the thing to say, and it puzzled me. And I thought, oh, well, I wonder if when I got into the Foreign Service, Kim Philby, the famous spy in MI6, was operating, and I suppose that he sent the names of all the people who put Russian as their language when they entered the service to the KGB, and so they got me on their books as speaks Russian. And when I came to this place where I had to deal with the Russian day to day, he'd been given a brief on me, which said warning notice. Watch out, he speaks Russian.
Yes. Yes, very good. And when you were thinking about going into the Foreign Office and diplomacy as perhaps being your career, your father gave you some advice and took you to visit someone who might be able to help you.
Yes, it's so funny. He took me to visit a friend of his, Harold Nicholson, who was wife of Peter Sackville West.
Husband, actually, yes.
Husband of Peter Sackville West, actually. And he took me to meet him because he knew him living in Kent, and he thought it'd be useful advice. Well, we sat down and had tea together, but he left the Foreign Service in the 1930s.
Yes.
And this was in 1948, 37. And his views about the Foreign Office were quite dated. I mean, all sorts of things he said. For instance, you had to be gone to public school, or I had been to public school. You had to have a degree at either Oxford or Cambridge. You've got to have a private income. And the whole atmosphere that he created for the Foreign Service was quite foreign to the sort of one which I thought I was going into.
Yes.
In fact, turned out to be. He was just
out of date.
30 years out of date.
Yes, yes.
Or 20 years out of date.
But it didn't put you off, because your
Didn't
first
put me off.
post was Madras, wasn't it?
Didn't put me on.
Your Russian wasn't useful there, though, was
Not
it?
much.
And then you went on to Trujol Oman Levis.
When I went on after Madras, we had to return from Madras, rather sad to see, because Elizabeth was very ill. We came home in rather a hurry. We had to be posted home. I was in the Foreign Office, and I was looking after the states in the Persian Gulf. All the states: Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Sharjah, Dubai, and so on. And we were worried that there was a lot of slave trading between the Pakistanis, and that Crucial Oman Coast, which is where Sharjah, Dubai, and so on, those little countries are. And we had to do something about it, but there was no sort of police force out there. And so we thought that the best thing to do is to establish some sort of police force. And I put up this proposal for a police force of 100 men, locally recruited. And it went into the Treasury, cut it down to 70 men, and then King Ibn Saud heard about this idea, and he thought it was an insult to him, because we were going to police the border, which was unmarked between his country and Abu Dhabi. But of course it was nothing to do with that at all. So he got furious. He summoned the ambassador in great rage and said this, amazed that his British friends could do this to him. And the British ambassador sent an urgent telegram saying, you can't do this. So anyway, my boss, the Foreign Office, thought we ought to scrap the whole thing. I said, we can't do that. And so we cut it down to 30. So we had 30 men. Well, we got 30 men, and a man called General Glubb, who some you may remember, was English general who was commander of the Arab Legion, a Jordan force of Jordanians and other Arabs. And he came to say, I asked him to come and see me and talk about setting a force up in the Arab countries. And he said he'd lend me an officer to be the first captain, the first leader of it. So he lent me an officer, and we put him in charge of the 30 men, and it was a great success. They were called the Crucial Oman Levies at that time when they were started, and they closed down the slave camps, and they restored law and order in the whole of that area.
And that was about 1951?
It was about 1951, yes.
And then in 1952 you had a visit to the Persian Gulf.
And I just tell you about the end one of the story of the Crucial Oman Levies. They are now the basis, they were within the basis of what's called the United Arab Emirates Army, which is
Still today?
It's still today. I mean, that's probably the most lasting thing I ever did in my service career, I think.
Well, congratulations. Right, well, then you went to visit the Persian Gulf.
Yes.
In 1952, April?
April 52.
Yeah.
I went. Yes, we went to Kuwait first. The Sheikh of Kuwait was reputed to be the richest man in the world. Believe it or not, riches in those days were quite different from what they are today. He was getting £50 million a year from his oil revenues, and we went to see him. And my boss was quite a senior man, just about to go as ambassador to Washington. He was taken in to see him, have an audience with him, talk to him, and I was left out in the waiting room. In the waiting room, which, if you can imagine a waiting room at this level, would be fairly posh. It was very, very simple. There was a simple wooden table, and on the table was a Bakelite State Express advertisement ashtray, and the only other ornament of the room was on the mantelpiece. Was a bottle, a ship in a bottle, but it wasn't propped up so the ship was horizontal. It was on its end, so the ship was up and down. It was an extraordinary
Not exactly luxurious then, with all the gold in the world there.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary. Yeah, we went on from there. We went to Qatar. Qatar was we had lunch with the Sheikh of Qatar, sitting on the floor, of course, and eating with our hands, and.
Did you wear an Arabic dress?
No, not at that stage. No, I wore a rather smart, pale what was then known as a tropical suit, which I was rather proud of, my best tropical suit. I sat on the floor, eating in my hands, and I had made the mistake of having an empty plate one time, and the sheikh was sitting opposite to me, leant across and pulled a great hunk off the sheep, which we were eating with our hands, and tossed it over the table to me. And I could see this is going to hit me in midriff and ruin my suit. But the splendid thing was that the sheikh had a Scottish chief of police who was sitting next to him, and he would have been the best slip catcher England could ever have employed, because he flung his hand out and got it in mid-air. And he was wonderful. And that saved my suit, and also my dignity.
Yes.
On that occasion. But that was when I had to learn to eat sheep's thighs, because my sheep's thighs are the delicacy when you're eating sheep, and when you're in those. And my boss always used to be given 2 sheep's thighs to eat. He didn't like the idea of eating sheep's thighs, so he used to pass them to me. And
Harold Nicholson didn't tell you about that, did you? That was part of the job.
No, I didn't know it was part of the job.
No.
So every meal we went to, I had to eat 2 sheep's thighs. They're not too difficult if you crack them with your teeth.
Oh, crack!
They're like an oyster.
How did it taste?
Well, not particularly nice, but you just swallow them
A bit
quickly.
watery.
You swallow them quite
A
quickly.
bit like an oyster or something.
They're like, well, it was an oyster. An oyster's a nice thing to eat, but the sheep's thighs are not very nice. I wouldn't choose to eat sheep's thighs, but I did have to eat. But
Part of the job,
it's
obviously.
part of the job,
Mm.
and I became known afterwards as the man who liked sheep's thighs in his family. This man's family, because his son came into the Foreign Service. He's pretty younger than me, and when he came to meet me, the first time he came to meet me, he said, "Oh, you're the man who loves sheep's thighs." Anyways, that's the reputation we have in my family. That was gutter, and we moved on to
The Sheikh of Shettar?
we went on to Sheikh of Sharjah. Then. We went on to Sharjah, which is actually at that time was an RAF base in that area was at Sharjah, and we stayed at the RAF base. But we went to dinner with the Sheikh of Sharjah. I wasn't called it supper because we were told to change in dinner jackets, and we arrived in dinner jackets, a black tie, and we found we were seated on the floor as usual, with the Sheikh sitting opposite to us, and the sheep in front of us, and we had to eat with our hands, and our dinner jackets got a bit greasy, but that was a strange lunch there. The Sheikh of Sharjah was newly appointed. He succeeded his father about 6 months earlier, and the reason he succeeded his father was that his father died in the London clinic, and when he was in the London clinic, this Sheikh's younger brother came over to look after him and deal with him, and he died sadly over Easter weekend, died on Good Friday, and as a good Muslim he had to be buried within 48 hours of his death, and I had to get hold of a coroner over the Easter weekend to agree that the body could be removed from the country back to Sharjah. It was one of the more difficult problems I had solved in my life. But I got one, and I got the body away. But this young man, was at the dinner, and he came up to me after the dinner, he said, "My brother's being very mean to me." I said, "What's he doing?" He said, "He's not giving me near enough money to live on. Could you speak to him and ask him to give me more?" And I said, "But I can't do that. It's not my business. You must ask him yourself." Oh, he said, "He's very, very horrid. He won't do anything." I said, "Well, I'm very sorry. It's the one thing I really can't do." So that was the end of that in the Sharjah. But they went to Dubai in that trip, and Dubai was then 2 huts in the desert. Sheikh lived in one, his family lived in the other. And there was nothing else there at all. I mean, when you look at, this was March 52, April 52. You look at it then and today and think of how it's changed. It's extraordinary.
Yes.
Quite extraordinary. It's about all, well, there's quite a lot about the Gulf, but that's probably all that's interesting to talk about.
What about Abu Saud?
Oh, yes, Ibn Saud is certainly worth talking about. One of the things that we were going to do on that trip was to go out and have an audience with Ibn Saud. So we flew from Bahrain to Dhahran, which is the American air base in Saudi Arabia, and we got out of Dhahran. We met by a smart-looking Arab in a car, and the doors were open. We rushed into the car. We went off to a house where we were said, "Here's your rest house at the moment," and we were left there, and we were rather puzzled by this. And then the man came back and said, "The Emir of Hawza is waiting to receive you." And we went, so we got in the car again, we'd taken off the Emir of Hawza. We thought there was something very odd about this. The British ambassador hadn't turned up, was supposed to meet us. How about, we were sitting with the Sheikh of Hawza, Emir of Hawza, and suddenly a very angry British ambassador broke in and said, "There you are, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, we've been brought here, we thought we were supposed to do this." No, he said, "I was given the wrong time of arrival for your plane.
Oh dear.
It said I could arrive late for it, and they've captured you and you've been kidnapped." So anyway, we had to smooth things down, and we got away and we went over. But then we were taken to Riyadh, and you had to those days you had to wear Arab dress in Riyadh. You couldn't be in Western clothes, and so we were measured we were taken to the royal guest house, and the court tailor came and measured us, and came back in half an hour later with our Arab clothes. We put them on. We looked pretty good sight, I must say.
Did you
We
have a
had
photograph, I
long
hope?
brown robe and a white headscarf and a black, what's called agal, which is the thing that holds the headscarf on our heads. And we looked at one another, we thought we looked pretty silly. But anyway, then we were taken off to the audience for the king. And you had to bow 3 times in the audience chamber. You bowed, you were Kenyan, you bowed halfway down, you bowed and you reached the king. Well, these things were holding down things were holding down the scarf on our head. And we were sitting down, and my boss was sitting on the king's left, and I was sitting next to him, and opposite was the British ambassador and one of his staff. And at a certain point in the conversation, when we were trying to explain what the this awful police force was doing, why we thought it was no harm to the king, I suddenly saw the ambassador looking at me and pointing at my boss and at my head. I looked up and I saw that his agar was slipped off, sort of cockeyed, and it was going to come off completely. And I thought, well, this is rather silly. So I put my hands up and I jammed it on, grabbed it down on his head, and to my horror, there were 2 villainous-looking bodyguards behind the king, and they started to draw their swords. And I thought, God, what's going to happen now? But fortunately, I think they thought I was going to murder my boss or something. But fortunately, he turned round to me and he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Thanks very much, old boy," and everybody relaxed.
Yes, gosh.
And,
it's quite dangerous, isn't it, being in the diplomatic service sometimes? Gosh.
Well, it was quite a dangerous moment. The king had started forward in his chair, wondering what was happening. Anyway, but we did quite an interesting audience, and I don't know, it must be one of the last English people, I suppose, who had an audience with Ibn Saud. He died early next year, early in 1953, and but the following morning, his Crown Prince gave a buffet lunch for us, outside on the ground outside.
Many sheep's eyes for you to eat? Many sheep's eyes to eat?
More sheep's eyes.
More sheep's eyes.
2 more. And Robert Makins my boss, was still the guest of honour. But there we had lunch, and there were no fewer than 3 future kings of Saudi Arabia at the lunch, all sons of Ibn Saud, one after the other. They were all sitting there around. It was rather, and the only other man, the man who was there doing all the interpreting, was a man called Philby, and he was Philby was Kim Philby's father, his father. But he'd gone to Saudi Arabia in the early days of the king as a General Motors representative. And he'd rather liked it there, and he stayed there. He'd taken an Arab wife, and he'd converted to Mohammedanism, and he'd been on the pilgrimage to Mecca, and the result was he was called Haji Philby, which meant he's been on the pilgrimage, and he was there. He was obviously the court joker. He was continued to live in Saudi Arabia, and seemed to know all the royal family very well, and he made jokes, and he did the interpreting of the lunch.
Well.
Which I had the other two sheep's eyes. And that was Saudi Arabia. That was, then we went back. I think we came home after that. I think we did enough.
I think you're quite relieved not to have to eat any more sheep's eyes.
I'd had enough sheep's eyes.
And then you went to the Rhine?
Then I went to Bonn.
Bonn,
and Bonn was a fairly ordinary diplomatic post, but it was Army of Occupation. Those days, an occupation headquarters, but it was an interesting post. But we had to cross. The only way to get across the Rhine, we lived on the west side of the Rhine, and the embassy was on the east side, and I had to get across the Rhine. Most of my colleagues lived there on the west side. We had to get across the Rhine by ferry every day, because there was no bridge. No bridge at Bonn then. The nearest bridge was way down by Cologne, a long way further south.
Had we bombed them in the war?
Huh?
Had we bombed the bridges?
No, we bombed the Cologne bridge, but that was up the other end. No, there just wasn't a bridge. There'd never been one. There's one now. But we had to get on the ferry to go across. And we always went on the same ferry at the same time, which Dr. Adenauer came on, because he lived on that side of the Rhine too, and he had to go across. And when he was coming down, he's got a cavalcade. The way was cleared, so he'd get onto the ferry and drive off easily. And he had a police car in front, and his own car, and then a police car behind. And he drove off. And great fun we young diplomats had was to try and block the cars so that he couldn't get off. And we never succeeded in doing it, except once. Once we did. Once we blocked the car behind, and couldn't get off. And eventually we let it go, and he let it clear. But he went down off the ferry, down a bump, and then up the other side onto the bank. And as he came up the other side, the man driving it, the policeman driving his hat came off, flew off to the ground, and the British Embassy staff who lived on the west coast had a rousing cheer that we'd had a victory.
And then the visit to the German presidential German visit to London was followed that 58.
Well, that was in was it 58? Yes, did I put that? Yes, it was. Well, it must have been 58. I was back in London then, and I was on the Foreign Office, in the German desk in the Foreign Office, and I had the job of organising the programme. And one of my functions was to draft a speech for the Queen to make at the banquet she was giving for the German president. So I drafted this speech, and it went up. I'm rather proud to say, without actually any changes at all. Went up to her, and she seemed to like it, and she made it. But I put in a touch which I thought might be controversial. I made her make a reference to her German ancestry, and I was just slightly kept my fingers crossed that this would go through, and it did go through. And she made it. She made the reference to her German ancestry, and she got absolutely pilloried for it in some parts of the press, who advised her to make this sort of remarks and sort of thing. So it was actually
very controversial then.
Great success for the Germans. I'm the German ambassador. Gave a special dinner to congratulate me on getting it.
Well, that's lovely. And then, what about the air crash in the Argentine floods?
The Argentine, that was a very frightening affair.
In 1960?
Yes, and I think there were going to be Anglo-Argentine naval exercises in the Argentine Mar del Plata, which is the Argentine naval base, and the Argentine government invited the Uruguayan government to send a group over to observe these exercises, and I happened to be in the embassy in Montevideo, which is the Uruguayan capital in those days, and the ambassador and I were included in the party which went over. It contained the heads of the three Uruguayan services, the Uruguayan Foreign Secretary and the Uruguayan Defense Minister, and an ambassador and myself, and a few other people. And we were going to fly. We had to fly over a very heavily flooded area of the Argentine. There had been serious floods that year, and when we flew over, there was a lake of water the whole way where we were flying. And we were in the middle of these floods, flying over quite happily, when the chief of air staff, the Uruguayan chief of the air staff, looked out of the pilot's cabin and says, "We've got a problem. One of our engines has broken down." So we thought, gosh, what's going to happen now? He said, "But don't worry, so we can perfectly well fly on one engine." So we thought, okay, we were right, fly on one engine. And that lasted for a bit, and after a few minutes' time, he came back again. He said, we're in a state of emergency. Both engines have gone. We've got no engines. We're going to have to come down." But we were we'd seen nothing but water below us. We didn't know how deep it was. And we knew we were going to have to come down in the water. Whether it was 6 foot deep or whether it was 10 foot deep or it was 6 inches deep, we had no idea. And the pilot came down. He did the perfect landing. No flat trouble at all. We opened the doors, the plane got out, got our feet a bit wet, and I said to the pilot, who was a friend of mine, I knew him, and I said, "How did you manage to do that?" And he said, "Well, I saw 3 cows standing in the water, and I knew if the cows stood, it would be shallow enough for me to land. So I landed, not where they were." I said, "What happened to the cows?" He said, "Well, I think better not ask what happened to the cows. There's someone under that plane." And that was it.
Oh dear.
But then we had to get away from this. We were in the middle of the floods. It was a bit awkward being in the middle of the floods with nowhere in sight. Fortunately, our radio was still working. So we managed to get a message to Buenos Aires that we were all right, and that we were down in the floods, but we were all right. And we couldn't think how to get out of the floods, because nothing could come and collect us. But we suddenly saw on the horizon a man coming with a cart, horse and cart, the farmer. So we shouted at him, and he looked at this extraordinary sight of seeing all these people in the middle of the floods and an aeroplane. But he came towards us, and we hailed him, and the Uruguayan officers explained what had happened to him. And we all piled onto the cart, about 20-25 of us, and the cart couldn't move because the horse couldn't pull us. So the younger ones of us, whom I was one, tried to get out and shove.
The disadvantage of being a young
we got out and
diplomat.
pushed.
Yes.
We had to push the car, and we got to a village, which is where he belonged, and we were met by somebody from the embassy. And we had to get to Buenos Aires, and we went by helicopter to Buenos Aires. We could take 3 of us at a time. It took 8 trips to get us all there. And but the interesting tailpiece of this story is that we managed to get word to the embassy through the radio that said that we were all right, the ambassador and I were all right, and she passed it over to the ambassador He passed it over to the ambassador in Uruguay and the embassy in Uruguay and to Elizabeth. So they knew we weren't her. But the ambassador's wife had decided to give a lunch party on the day we were away for all the wives of the people on the trip, the service wives and the minister's wives. And Elizabeth was one of the people who were going to be there to help her. When the lunchtime came, she wondered how many were going to turn up, because we had this excellent morning. And Uruguayan service, official television, or radio rather, radio, had got hold of this story, and they put it out on their news. But on the news, idiotically, they added the report of the crash. Said it's not known how many survivors there were.
Oh.
And so this came out on the Uruguayan news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Elizabeth and their best wife knew perfectly well that we'd survived, but the result was that a lot of the wives didn't turn up for lunch, but the wives who did come, Elizabeth swears is true, were wearing mourning veils, just in case.
The whole thing must have been really scary.
I don't actually believe her story. It's a
Yes.
untold story.
In 1965, you went to Paris.
That's right.
And British Week in Lyon.
Yes, well, I was doing it. I was in charge of export promotion, just trying to sell British exports or get British exports launched. And the one thing I take to my credit in Paris was getting Marks and Spencer into a printemps, which I consider rather cool.
Very cool.
But we had one of the forms of trade promotion which the Board of Trade were rather keen on those days was having British weeks in different cities. They'd have one in Milan, and I'd been to see it, and they wanted to have one in Lyon, which is in my part of my bailiwick, because I had the whole of France as my responsibility. British Week in Lyon, we appointed a director, a man to run the British Week in Lyon, who was a total failure. And the group of businessmen who were responsible for organising the British business side of this week had said he must be removed, he's no good. And they said, the Board of Trade said, well, we have to appoint a new one. And they're glad to say that we want Clive Rose to do it. And so I had to do it as an addition to my normal task as trade promotion. I had the job running this British week. But it was very exciting, really. I more or less commuted from Paris to Lyon by train. And when I was down in Lyon, I used to had to go around to all the shops and try and persuade them to put goods in their window for this week, and to put up little Union Jacks and badges.
That's hard work then.
look British.
Yes.
And it was a success. I mean, a lot of them did it very well, and we got a lot of the shops, very large number of shops, actually did stock British goods and went on stocking them, and put British flags up. And when the day came, a great day came in the week of the start, the Duke and Duchess of Kent came in to open it, and they did very well. They were very good at it. They did it very well, and the week went very well. There were various things happened, but there's nothing very spectacular in the week. At the end of the week, the chairman of the group, the businessmen who were behind the week, came out, decided to give them. Well, I knew his wife was. His wife was going to give them presents to the chief people involved in running the week, and the first person who got a present was my boss, who was a senior man in the embassy, the commercial minister, who had nothing to do with it at all, actually, but he was my boss, so I suppose he had to get it. And he got a lovely glass rose bowl.
Yes.
And he showed us this with great pride, and then Elizabeth was going to be called in to get her present on behalf of her what she'd done with me, and she thought a lovely thing if I get a glass rose bowl like this, and she went in, and the woman gave her, a Coca-Cola making machine, and Elizabeth looked rather surprised in this, and she said, Elizabeth did the only thing positive, she burst into tears, and the woman said to her, said, darling, I knew you'd love it with all those little children. So anyway, Elizabeth was very upset by this, and we found an outlet to the Coca-Cola making machine in the embassy canteen. They were quite happy to take it on. I think that's all I need to say about the British Week in Lyon.
That's lovely.
But it was a great success.
Oh. What about Russian connection? Like, when we met the Russian allies.
What?
Yeah.
At the negotiations?
In Vienna.
In Vienna, yes. Well, I went to Vienna, and this was the only negotiation that ever took place between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. It took place those days in Vienna. That we were negotiating. Were supposed to be negotiating arms control, reductions in arms. We particularly wanted to get the large number of Russian forces stationed in East Germany reduced. So we had a more or less equal number on the other side in the middle of Europe, and that was our objective. But there were 12 NATO delegations, each with a head. I had an ambassador at the head of it. I was the head of the British delegation, and there were 7 Warsaw Pact delegations led by the Russian, who was the Russian ambassador, head of the Russian. Where we started off rather stuffily, calling one another Mr. Ambassador and this sort of thing. We found this isn't going to work, so we started then to call one another by our first names, and all the Russians we were on first name terms with all the Russians and their allies, and they were on first name terms with us, and this went pretty well, except that we found when we want to have a social life, this usual sort of diplomatic process of having diplomatic dinners was a total failure, because if you had dinner, you had the Russian ambassador and some of his East European colleagues. They wouldn't say a word until the Russians spoke. They wouldn't say anything about any subject unless he'd taken the lead by speaking about that subject. So this didn't make much sense. So we decided that we'd got to do something different, and we started to have informal meetings in our own houses. There weren't many houses, but I had a house, and my American colleague had a house, and the Russian had a house. There weren't many others, so we'd variegate round them, and we used to sit and talk and discuss, and then after we talked, we had a drink. And afterwards, at some point, and I can't remember exactly what point, the American deputy ambassador suggested that we might have a sing-song together, and he produced some sheets of music with the songs on it, which he handed round, and we started singing. Well, this went very well. The Russians loved singing, so did their allies, and we all enjoyed it. We used to sing, but this development went on, and we got the habit of meeting regularly for dinner and singing, and we used to meet in restaurants, and then to the surprise of the owners of the restaurant, we put our plates down at the end of the dinner, and suddenly, inducted by the American deputy, we suddenly start singing songs, and the American eventually produced a songbook. This is it. It's called the Handbook for Negotiators, and this is a handbook, quite a thick book, which contains American songs, Russian songs, French songs, German songs, and the Russians are in Russian and phonetic Russian and English translation, and we had this round, and this was handed round after he had a collection of these, and he handed them round after dinner. Everybody had one, and then he'd stand up and he'd say, "Number 6, number 15." What it was, and we all trummed over the pages, and then he'd conduct us, and we started singing. And it was a great success for breaking down barriers.
Yes, and here we are thinking there's all these problems between the East and the West, and there you are singing together.
It was great fun.
Yes, and this particular copy is rather special, isn't it, because of the things on the front?
Well, it's not only that, but it's got all typical British songs. I mean, there's a Tavern of the Town, British Grenadiers, and typical American ones. Shenandoah is in here, of course, My Old Kentucky Home, and quite typical, quite common Russian ones like Kalinka, which is a very common one, the old river, what's it? This one I've got. I think this is the last only copy remaining in this country, and it's one which was given to Elizabeth at our farewell party when we left Vienna. This was handed to us, and all the people at the dinner, they all wrote things on the front page of it, and there's things like
Lovely comments.
well, the American ambassador Stan Resor wrote to Elizabeth, "The best delegation mother," and the Belgian wrote to Elizabeth, "The best hostess in town," and so on as it went on. And there's a lovely comment by the wife of the East German ambassador. It's one of the Easterners. Says, "You are in our hearth," which meant you are in our hearts, but she got it wrong. but they're rather nice anyway. That's good. It's a wonderful souvenir. I think it's the only one that's left in this country. I can't imagine anybody else has got one now. Lovely. It was,
yes, very special.
Yes, it was special.
But
we got on very well together with the Russians, and I got on. My Russian ambassador was Oleg Christoph, who actually, by reputation, was an opera singer monkey, because he wanted to go into the opera singing, and his father insisted he should go into the diplomatic service. So anyway, he was there, and he sang lustily. But he and I got on very well together. Elizabeth got on particularly well with his number two, Michael Smirnovsky, who'd been a Russian ambassador in London, and who had when he came, Elizabeth always used to find herself sitting next to him at meals, dinners and things. And she saw it one day, she said, "Michael, you don't look very well, what's the matter?" He said, I can't remember what her name was, anyway, his wife, she's in Moscow. And Elizabeth said, "What's she doing there?" He said, "Oh, she's gone to look after her grandchild." And this is another story about the grandchild. But he said, "When's she coming back?" And he said, Michael said, "Oh, I don't know." I said, well, he said, "Do you want her back?" "Yes, of course I want her back," he said. I said, "Have you told her you want her back?" "No," he said. "Oh, no, she knows." "I don't expect she does, Michael, you go and tell her." And so anyway, a couple of nights later, she was sitting next to him again, and she looked rather happier, and she said, "You look a bit happier, are you all right?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Is she coming back?" "Yes," he said, "I did what you said. I spoke to her on the telephone. I said, I want you back. She's coming back tomorrow."
How lovely.
So those are the sidelines of diplomacy,
yes.
which sometimes works. But I did have a difficult time with my, because I my Russian colleague, Oleg Klestov, he came in, I heard him in my outside office, Kathy, my PA, I could see that she was rather worried, and she came in looking rather serious face. She said, "The Russian ambassador wants to see you." And I said, "Oh, come in, Oleg." He said, "Mr. Ambassador, I've come to make a protest." He said, "You've insulted the Red Army." I said, "Goodness, how on earth have I managed to do that?" And he said, "Your service advisor is giving a buffet lunch supper party, which he's asked all his colleagues in both sides on Red Army Day. It's the day I traditionally give a big party in honour of Red Army, and said they've all accepted, and I can't get what to come to Red Army Day." He said, "It's an insult." He said, "You've done it on purpose." He said, You did this. You got him to do this." He said, "I'm sure this is a direct insult." And I said, "I assure you, it doesn't. My insult nothing to do with me." He said, "You must have known. You must have asked your authority. He couldn't give a party like this without having your authority." And I said, "I can assure you he could. He's perfectly entitled to give a party if he likes, on any night he likes. I think it's a pity he's chosen the Red Army Day, but tough." and I'm sorry if you take it. He said, oh no, he said, I don't believe that. He said, you couldn't possibly have done it without you consulting you, and you did this as an insult, a deliberate insult to the Red Army, he said. And he stopped out. He said, Mr. Ambassador, I shan't forget this, a deliberate insult to the Red Army. He went off, and I thought, gosh, what did I gain for insulting the Red Army? Not much, except for the angry ambassador. Anyway, I got hold of his number two, who was Michael Swanowski, who'd been ambassador in London, who I'd known in London, and I said, Michael, I'm in trouble with your boss. He said, you are. I said, well, you've got to do something about it. I said, we've got to do something to get rid of this, which is very difficult, very difficult. Yeah, I said, well, he thinks, I said, you've got to tell him that this isn't the way British ambassadors behave. It's a stupid thing to think I did it on purpose, or I knew anything about it. I said, what gain would I have from it anyway? You know perfectly well this is not the sort of thing I would do. He said, very difficult. Anyway, he went away, and 2 days later, we were sitting opposite one another at the meeting, and he looked across at me and he just nodded twice, like that, and I knew that he'd done his stuff. And I never had to worry more about it.
Yeah.
That was the end of it.
And did you hold the party that day you wanted, Red Army Day?
Oh yes, he'd had it. I mean, it was over by that time.
Oh, I see.
It was all over. But that was the end. That was the end of it. But it was an awkward moment.
And then you were in London in 1976 to 79? You were in the Deputy Secretary Cabinet Office?
Yes, right. Yes, that was the time I got to know Jim Callaghan and liked him very much. And I had got on very well with a number of his ministers. Mervyn Rees, particularly the Home Secretary, who's been a great friend, because I had a lot to do with him, and particularly during the Winter of Discontent, because I was chairman of a group called the Civil Contingencies Unit, and our job in normal times was to call together a group to deal with any big emergency that arose. I mean, sometimes it could be bad weather conditions in the West Country, snow conditions holding up traffic and so on. It could be an aeroplane crash on the M1, and also it could be Thames flooding and so on, all sorts of areas. And I used to call together the appropriate people from departments and we to deal with this situation. And it turned out that this was the body which got seriously involved in the Winter of Discontent, because where our job was to try and foresee where the next crisis was going to emerge, whether it was ambulance drivers or whether it was railway the oil buzzer drivers, as it was, and try and think up what we could do about it, how we could deal with it. And this went through all through the Winter of Discontent. And at that time I got to know Jim Callaghan very well, because I reported direct to him on a number of things, and I liked it very much. But he did say once to me, he came to me one evening. I went to him and see. I had great trouble with pickets on the one of the northwest ports, which was the main port for ICI salt imports, and this was a serious matter. Salt imports being picketed because they were the lifeline of the country. And I reported this to him, and he said, "Tell that general up there to take over the port." And I said, "Prime Minister, are you sure you mean that?" He said, "Don't argue with your Prime Minister, go away and do what you're told." So I rang this, I got hold of this general's name from the Minister of Defence. I rang him and said, "General, I've got a message for you from the Prime Minister." So he said, "Oh yes, is it? What? Interesting. Yes, tell me." I said, "He wants you to take over the port." And there was a sort of pause. He said, "What did you say?" I said, "You heard me." He said, "But how do I take over a port? I didn't know anything about running a port. What am I to do?" said, well, he said, that's your job. My job is to pass on the Prime Minister's instructions. We said, I can't do anything about the port. I said, well, I'll tell you what to do. Put a group of 3 people down overnight. This was in the evening, quite late in the evening. Put 3 people down overnight with some paper and pens, and tell them to come up in the morning with a contingency plan. What you do if you had to take over the port. And he said, well, he said, I don't think they'll have any idea how to work it. I said, you try them. They could put their heads on together and get down. So he said, well, I suppose so. I'll do something anyway. He put them together. And I rang him at about 8 o'clock the next morning. I said, I've got on. Well, he said, I've got a few pages of questions, he said, but they don't seem to be makes much sense. He said, I don't think I'd go on, really. I don't for talk on. I said, you've got a contingency plan. Well, he said, you can call it that if you like, but I haven't much confidence in it. Well, he said, I'm going to call it a contingency plan. So I went to the Prime Minister and I said, Prime Minister, I've been in touch with the General in charge of the North West District, and he's had a team of people working all night to work out the contingency plan for taking over the port. He's got his plan ready this morning. He's not wholly confident in it, but he's got a plan. Do you want me to order him to go ahead, to tell him to go ahead? And Jim Callaghan said, Clive, I think we'll find some other way of dealing with this problem. And I said, that's a win for Rose.
What about the Guadeloupe summit? Wasn't that an interesting time?
Summit. Well, Prime Ministers and Presidents love summits. They have the feeling they're running the world, and they sit down and talk together in summits. And there was a summit in Guadeloupe, French colony of Guadeloupe, at which the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, Schmidt, the French Prime Minister, who was the Frenchman? I can't remember his name anyway. Frenchman, and the American. It was Carter, President Carter. They were all together, and they used to meet. And this was a French colony, and the French had completely cleared the resort of people, so we had it to ourselves. Next door was a topless bathing beach, which interested some of us at the time. Used to walk through it to get to the village, but this village was cleared. This beach was cleared, and the men, great men, met in the morning, and they talked with about one person on each side. The Secretary of the Cabinet, John Hunt, went with Jim Callaghan, and I stayed behind. My job was to sort out messages coming in from London, cables coming in from London, which weren't very, very satisfactory. The winter of discontent was just in full swing at that time, and it was just get underway in quite a nasty way, and I was getting telegrams about it, and I had to select the ones that I thought the Prime Minister ought to see. And my job after lunch, when Jim Callaghan and John Hunt were relaxing in bathing trunks on the beach, I turned up rather more properly dressed than that, with a sheaf of telegrams in my hand for the Prime Minister to read. And he used to look up. It was only 3 days, but he did every time. A few times said, waved at me and said, "Go away, Clive, I don't want to know anything about it." And I said, well, I think you ought to know these. And the Cabinet Secretary said, "We give them to me, I'll feed them in when he's able to take them." And I gave them to him and he fed them in. And that's the only thing really about tell you about the Guadeloupe summit. But it was amusing to be there. It was an interesting thing to be in on. Meet them all.
You didn't have a fancy going into politics? You didn't fancy going into politics yourself and becoming an MP and maybe a Prime Minister?
Never. I saw too many. I've seen too many. But I did I have to say that I liked the Labour ministers. I got on very well with. I knew Merlin Rees and Jim Callaghan himself and Dennis Healy and others. And I liked them all very much. got on, we had good jokes together, and I had fun with them. And Shirley Williams was an interesting one. But when Thatcher took over,
How did you get on with her?
well, I found her difficult. She had a very different style in the cabinet meetings. When I was in the cabinet meetings, Callaghan he took the Callaghan meeting. He looked at he was rather baggy shoulders and sort of rather unkempt hair and you know, just sort of not very smart really. And then he went round the table and he used to say to people, I remember him saying to Fred Murray, the Defence Secretary once, who was talking rather, he said, now shut up, Fred, let somebody else have a chance, stop talking for once. And you know, this sort of thing went on. Mm-hmm. Well, when Thatcher came in, she did for my last few months, about 6 months, in that job, the tone was completely different. 1 week was Callaghan the chair, next week was Thatcher's first cabinet meeting on Thursday. And there she was, both upright, she'd obviously had a special hairdo, she got a very smart dress on, and she was she called everybody to attention, you know, and everybody around the table. She was outdoing them all. She went round the table and she asked them all to say something about their jobs, and she found that she knew just as much about their jobs as they did. And she got round to poor Francis Pym, he was then Defence Secretary, and she said, Francis, what do you think about the future of the British nuclear deterrent? And Francis said, Prime Minister, I'm afraid I haven't had time to read that brief yet. And she said, haven't you? He said, I've been in bed this morning. That was the sort of style which they had to live with. Yes. It was totally different. Anyway, apart from Peter Carrington, who I liked very much, I didn't get on terribly well with the other ministers. We only had 6 months with them. And I only had 6 months with them, and then I went off to another job where I saw much more of Peter Carrington. But that was the Cabinet Office. I suppose I don't think there's much more to say. I mean, it was one of the busiest jobs I had, I think. And I was in charge of Foreign Affairs and Defence. That means to say, making sure that the cabinet decisions on Foreign Affairs and Defence were implemented. How was done about them? What they've been done? Report back what was being done about them. It's quite a busy job.
I know you don't like to blow your own trumpet, but as a result of all your work, you were knighted twice. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I thought that might be
well, I was knighted. The first time I was knighted was I was in Vienna, and I had bad relations with the British ambassador in Vienna because we took over my delegation. We took over one floor of his embassy. He didn't like it at all. He tried to make life as difficult as he could for us. And he did make life very difficult for us, actually, in many ways. But he didn't. We didn't get on anyway. Somehow we didn't get on with his people because he told them not to get on well with us. So we didn't mix in with them much. But I was then knighted, and I was there, and I went to see the Permanent Under Secretary. I said, "What did you want to knight me for?" He said, "I thought it'd help you with your relations with the ambassador." And I said, "Well, that's a good thought." He said, he's been knighted too, so perhaps I can level up with him. That was the first time. The second time was when I was in my last job in Brussels as British representative in NATO, on the NATO Council, which was the governing body of NATO. And I was knighted then as a sort of farewell present, I suppose. That's the time when I had the Queen. She came to NATO. The first time she'd ever visited NATO was when I was there. She came for a day, NATO. And I had the job of arranging the programme for her and corresponding with our private secretary about the plans for it and so on. And I arranged the programme. And I thought when she came in, you'd come down NATO. In NATO, you'd come into sort of entrance hall leading up to the council chamber, which was where she was going to be received by the Secretary General, Joseph Luntz, at the time. and she had walked down this corridor. And I thought, what a good idea to have members of the international staff of NATO, international bureaucrats, like international staff, with their families and children there. And so they were all along either side of this corridor. There was a group of people, national staff, and their small children in front of them, to see the Queen. And I walked behind. The Queen was walking with the Secretary General down there, and I was walking behind them with Fitzphilip. And she kept on stopping and talking to the children. And she loved talking to the children. They loved meeting her. And this meant the progress was much slower than it would have been if anybody else had been there. But and then suddenly a woman pushed past me and to get up to talk, say something to the Queen. And she came back. When she came back, she apologized. She said, "I'm so sorry." He said, I pushed you. She was one of her ladies in waiting. He said, "But I was taking the Queen an extra handkerchief because she would never refuse any present she gets from a child, even if it's a sweet taken out of a child's mouth, she'll still take it. And I want to make sure she had a spare pair of gloves, a spare handkerchief."
Oh, that's
anyway,
lovely.
she got to the council chamber and she made a very nice speech. And they were all very pleased with her, and she had several other meetings. And she had lunch given by the Secretary General. And I was sitting next to her, he was sitting opposite to her. I sat on her left, on the opposite to her, opposite to him. And she was charming. We started talking. After a bit, I thought I'd get one word in, so I said that my daughter, Antonia, had been at school at contemporary at Benenden with her daughter, Anne. And I said, my daughter was present. And she said, "Was she? Very interesting." He said, "How did you like it?" I said, I liked Benenden very much. I thought it was a very good school. I found the headmistress very frightening. She was a very tough woman. I found her very frightening. And she said to me, "Oh, did you?" He said, "So did I."
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Sir Clive Rose. That was a pleasure.
Is that my end of my story?
That's it.
That's
That was lovely. Yes, thank you. That was really lovely. Now you can relax. That was so good. I hope you haven't you talked too much.
No, I haven't.
Have you got more?
No, I haven't, but I got wondering if I'd everything I'd
No, I'm sure we can come back
quite,
for more.
quite enough.
Yeah, we
Quite
can
enough.
come back for more.